Listen carefully. Because what I'm about to tell you is not something you randomly found on the internet. You didn't just click this video. You were somehow led here, even if you don't understand how. And if you are hearing this right now at this exact moment, then something in your life is already shifting in a way you cannot see yet. But you can feel it. Most people will ignore this message, scroll away, laugh it off, or call it coincidence. But you didn't, and that alone is not normal, because lately, something has been happening in your life that you cannot fully explain. People who used to talk to you suddenly feel distant, or they disappeared without reason. Certain situations that once felt stable started breaking without warning, and inside your mind, there is this constant feeling, like something is off, even when everything looks fine on the surface. You told yourself it's just stress. You told yourself it's overthinking. But deep down, you already know that's not the full truth. Because this feeling didn't come and go, it stayed. And when something stays in your awareness for too long, it usually means it's trying to show you something. There is a pattern in your life right now that you have not fully noticed. Yet, it is not random. It is not accidental. It is structured, and when your life starts showing patterns instead of randomness, it means something inside your reality is starting to change direction. You may have noticed small things first, people. Suddenly remembering you after a long time. Unexpected. Messages from someone you stopped expecting anything from, or moments where you feel like someone is thinking about you, even without any contact, and at the same time, other people started fading away. Without explanation. No fights, no closure, just distance. This is not normal coincidence. This is something deeper, happening at an energetic level that most people don't notice because they are too busy looking at the surface of life. But you are not like most people. That is why you are noticing it. And here is something even more strange. When your life starts shifting in a real way, confusion always comes first. Before clarity, there is chaos. Before success, there is silence. Before a breakthrough, there is isolation. Everything that is not aligned with your next level slowly starts removing itself from your life without permission. People, habits, situations, even thoughts, and you start feeling like you are in between two versions of yourself. The old version that is fading, and the new version that has not fully arrived yet. That in-between phase is what confuses most people. They think they are losing something, but in reality, they are being adjusted. Because not everything that leaves you is loss. Sometimes it is alignment, and right now, your energy is not the same as it was a few months ago. You think the world is changing around you, but what if I told you, it is actually you who is changing first and everything else is reacting to that change? That is why certain people feel uncomfortable around you now without any clear reason. That is why conversations don't feel the same anymore. That is why your silence feels heavier than before. Is not that something is wrong with you, it is that something in you is becoming harder to ignore. And when that happens, life stops being simple, because reality starts responding to your inner state instead of your expectations. And if you have been feeling like everything is slightly delayed, slightly disconnected, slightly different than before, that is not your imagination. That is transition. But here is the part most people miss completely. When you start becoming aware of this shift, you also become more sensitive to everything around you. You start noticing timing. You start noticing patterns in conversations. You start noticing who comes closer when you are rising, and who disappears when you are changing. And suddenly life doesn't feel random anymore. It feels like something is being observed, calculated, adjusted. And the strange part is, you are part of that observation too, not in a scary way, but in a way where your awareness itself becomes part of the process. Because once you start seeing patterns, you cannot unsee them. And once you cannot unsee them, your entire perception of life starts to shift. Now I want you to pause for a second and think honestly. Have you been feeling like your life is preparing you for something, even if you don't know what that something is? Have you felt moments where everything goes quiet? Not empty, but meaningful silence. If yes, then you already know what this is, and if not, you will understand soon enough, because this is only the beginning. And what comes next will make this feel like just the surface of something much deeper. And if you are still here, it means something inside you already knows this is not just a normal video. Because once you start seeing patterns in your life, you can't unsee them anymore. And now the deeper part begins. You thought what you were feeling was just confusion, but it was actually preparation, because there is a phase in every person's life where reality starts responding differently to them, not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly, almost invisibly. And this is where most people break their own understanding of life because they assume everything should make sense immediately. But real transformation never works like that. It starts with silence, with distance, with unexplained changes that don't have clear answers. And you may have noticed that lately, answers have been missing from your life. People don't explain themselves properly anymore. Situations don't close properly anymore. And even your own thoughts feel like they are moving faster than your understanding. That is not confusion. That is transition overload. Because when your inner frequency changes, your outer world cannot keep up immediately. And that delay between inner change and outer reality, that is where all the emotional pressure comes from. That is why you feel like you are between two realities, one that is already fading, and one that has not fully formed yet. And this is exactly where your mind starts questioning everything. You start asking yourself, why is this happening to me? Why now? Why does everything feel connected but unclear at the same time? But the truth is, not everything is meant to be clear in the moment. Some things are only meant to be understood later, when you are ready to handle them without fear. Because fear is the only thing that distorts perception. And right now, your perception is being upgraded. That is why old emotions feel heavier than before. That is why old memories come back randomly. That is why certain people suddenly appear in your thoughts without warning. It is not random. It is your system reorganizing itself, because when a shift is happening in your life, your mind replays everything that is unresolved, not to punish you, but to clear you. And here is something most people will not understand. The more you try to resist this phase, the longer it feels. But the moment you stop resisting it internally, everything starts to settle faster. Because resistance creates noise, and clarity can only exist in silence. Now let's go deeper. There are moments in this phase where you feel completely disconnected from your surroundings, like you are physically present, but mentally somewhere else, like your attention is no longer fully attached to the same reality as before. And that feeling can be uncomfortable, even scary for some people, but it is actually a sign of expansion, because your awareness is no longer limited to one layer of thinking. You are starting to see things from multiple angles at once, and when that happens, simple explanations stop working. You start sensing intentions behind words. You start noticing energy behind silence. You start understanding people without them saying anything. And once that starts happening, your relationships begin to change naturally, not because you want them to, but because you can no longer ignore what you see. And this is where another shift happens. People who were once close start feeling emotionally distant, not because something went wrong, but because something inside you stopped aligning with their level of awareness. And when alignment breaks, connection becomes difficult to maintain. But here is the part that confuses most people. They think they are losing people, when in reality, they are simply outgrowing certain versions of connection, because not every connection is meant to evolve with you. Some connections are only meant to exist in one phase of your life, and when that phase ends, they naturally dissolve. Now listen carefully, because what I am about to say next is very important. During this stage, you may start noticing something strange. Certain moments in your life will feel extremely timed, like you meet someone exactly when you were thinking about change, or you hear something exactly when you needed direction, or you experience something that feels like it was placed there intentionally. And this creates a feeling like life is not random anymore, like there is a structure behind everything. But instead of making things clearer, it makes them more mysterious, because you cannot find who is controlling the pattern. And that uncertainty creates deep curiosity inside you. You start paying more attention to everything, more aware, more sensitive, more observant. And this is where transformation becomes irreversible. Because once awareness increases, you cannot go back to ignorance. Now I want you to be honest with yourself for a moment. Have you been feeling like your life is quietly pushing you toward something you don't fully understand yet? Not in a stressful way, but in a meaningful way, like something is building, slowly, underneath everything. If yes, then you are already inside this phase, and if no, you will notice it soon, because what is happening is not limited to emotion. It is structural, and once structure starts changing, everything connected to. And if you are still watching this, then something inside you has already crossed a point of no return. Because once a person starts recognizing the hidden patterns in their life, they don't go back to how they used to see the world, not completely, not ever. You may try to act normal again. You may try to ignore what you felt, but deep inside, something has already changed in you permanently. And now, what you are experiencing is not confusion anymore. It is awareness expanding beyond comfort. Because the moment you stop rejecting the patterns in your life, the patterns start revealing themselves more clearly, and that is exactly what is happening now. Everything that felt random before is starting to feel connected, but not in a simple way, in a way that almost feels too precise to be coincidence, and that is where most people start feeling uneasy, because the human mind is trained to believe in randomness. But when randomness starts disappearing, the mind loses its comfort zone, and right now, your comfort zone is breaking quietly, not violently, not suddenly, but slowly enough that you only notice it when you look back. You may remember moments recently where something small happened, but it stayed in your mind longer than it should have. A conversation that felt different, a silence that felt heavy, a timing that felt too perfect, or a situation that ended without closure, yet still continues inside your thoughts. And the strange part is, the more you try to forget it, the more it returns. That is not weakness. That is processing, because your mind is not just remembering events anymore. It is decoding meaning behind events, and this is where reality starts to feel layered. One layer is what everyone sees, and another layer is what only you are starting to sense. And when a person begins to see both layers at once, they can never fully return to only one. Now something deeper is happening in your emotional system. You might have noticed that your reactions are changing. Things that used to bother you don't affect you the same way anymore, and things you used to ignore now feel strangely significant. It is like your emotional sensitivity has been recalibrated. And this recalibration is not random. It happens when your internal perception starts shifting faster than your external environment. That is why you feel slightly disconnected from people who are still operating at your old level of awareness, not because they changed, but because you did. And this is where emotional isolation begins. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being unable to relate fully to what you once related to. And even though this feels like distance, it is actually transition, because growth always creates temporary separation. Now listen carefully, because this is where the story deepens. There are moments in life where everything starts aligning in a very strange way. You think about something, and shortly after you see it, you question something, and a random source gives you an answer indirectly. You feel something internally, and reality reflects it in symbolic ways. This creates a strange loop, where your thoughts and external reality start interacting in a way that feels almost synchronized. And when this starts happening, a person usually becomes more observant. They start noticing timing more than events, patterns more than people, and meaning more than situations. And this is where transformation becomes irreversible, because awareness is not something you can turn off once it expands. Now you may also feel something else. A subtle pressure inside your thoughts, not fear exactly, but intensity, like something is building in the background of your life, even if nothing visible is happening yet. And this is one of the most misunderstood phases of inner transformation, because externally, life may look quiet. But internally, everything is being reorganized. Old emotional attachments are loosening, old belief systems are collapsing, old identities are fading without announcement, and the new version of you is not fully visible yet. That in-between state creates emotional confusion, because you cannot fully identify as who you were, and you cannot fully recognize who you are. becoming. So you exist in a temporary void between identities, and that void feels like uncertainty. But it is not destruction. It is reconstruction. Now here is something important you need to understand. Not everyone around you will understand this shift. Some people will think you are changing for no reason. Some will assume you are becoming distant. Some will feel uncomfortable around your silence, and some will simply drift away without explanation. But none of this is accidental. Because when a person changes internally at a deep level, their external connections adjust automatically. Some connections strengthen, some dissolve, some pause, and some transform into something completely different. And the painful part is not the change itself. It is the lack of explanation, because humans naturally want closure. But life does not always provide closure in real time. Sometimes understanding only arrives after distance. Now you may also start noticing something very subtle. Your intuition feels stronger, not in a dramatic way, but in small moments. You sense things before they happen. You feel shifts before they become visible. You recognize energy changes before words are spoken. And at first, you may doubt it. But over time, patterns confirm it, and once your intuition starts aligning with reality consistently, your perception of life changes permanently, because you stop relying only on what is visible and start trusting what is felt. Now I want you to pause internally for a moment. Not physically, but mentally, and ask yourself honestly, have you been feeling like your life is not just happening anymore, but unfolding in a direction you don't fully understand yet? Not chaotic, but structured in a way you cannot explain? If yes, then you are already deep inside this phase, and what you are experiencing is not something external. It is internal alignment catching up with external reality. And this process does not reverse, it only completes. Now, what comes next is even more important, because once awareness reaches this level, the next stage is clarity. And clarity does not always feel comforting at first, because clarity removes illusions. And illusions are what made things feel simpler before. But once clarity begins to form, everything you misunderstood about your past starts to reorganize itself in your mind. People's behavior starts making sense, events start connecting backwards, and moments you once ignored start revealing meaning. And this is where a new kind of understanding begins, not emotional understanding, but structural understanding. And that is the point where transformation becomes complete, because you are no longer reacting to life. You are observing it, and once that shift happens, you never see the world the same way again, not even for a moment. And now, something starts to change in a way you cannot ignore anymore. Because once you reach this level of awareness, silence is no longer empty. It starts to feel meaningful, like something is communicating through it. Without words, without sound, but still very clear in its own way, and you may notice it in your daily life. Moments where you stop, suddenly for no reason. Moments where your thoughts shift, direction without warning. Moments where something inside you says pay attention even when nothing is visibly happening. At first, you ignore it because it feels too subtle to be important, but then it starts happening more often, and that's when it becomes impossible to dismiss, because now it's not just a feeling, it's a pattern, and patterns are never accidental. They repeat for a reason. They repeat until you notice them, and when you finally do notice them, something inside you changes permanently. You stop looking at life as random events happening one after another, and you start seeing something underneath it, a structure, a flow, a design that was always there, but hidden under noise. And this realization doesn't come with comfort. It comes with intensity, because your mind tries to hold on to old explanations. But they no longer fit. Old answers feel incomplete. Old beliefs feel too small. Old logic starts breaking under the weight of what you are now sensing. And this creates a strange internal pressure. Not painful exactly, but heavy. Like your consciousness is expanding faster than your ability to explain it. And during this phase, something else begins to happen too. Your memory becomes sharper in unusual ways. Not just remembering events, but remembering feelings attached to those events. You start recalling moments you had completely forgotten, but now they return with meaning. A conversation from months ago suddenly feels important. A person you barely thought about suddenly feels relevant again. A situation you once ignored suddenly connects with something happening now. And this is where time itself starts feeling different, because you stop experiencing life in a straight line. Past, present, and future start feeling loosely connected, like everything is part of a larger pattern you are slowly becoming aware of. And this is where emotional confusion deepens for many people, because they cannot explain why their inner world feels more active than their outer world, why their thoughts feel more alive than their environment, why solitude suddenly feels more informative than social interaction. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to detach from unnecessary noise, not because you are forced to, but because it no longer resonates with your internal state. And that is where transformation becomes visible from the outside.